and welcome to Your Wealthy Self with me, Regina Martinelli. This show is about money and a whole lot more. Here we focus on you being able to expand your capacity for money, success, and abundance and your inner wealth. For you to have what's most important to you inside and out so that you too can be your wealthy self. And today is one of those days where we will be talking about the whole lot more piece. Because today my guest is Meghna Majmudar. Again, I did it again. Who is the founder of Power Fluency? Majmudar. Today we're doing the second part of this important topic on Power Fluency. And if you missed part one, you can find it in last week's episode, and you really do want to watch it. Meghna herself has had 25 years of experience as a strategy consultant and executive coach across diverse industries: healthcare, technology, financial services, professional sports, automotive. I've got so many questions for you, as well as several nonprofit organizations. But she works with firsts and onlys who do the inner work to build an authentic sense of power, authority, and leadership, and navigate the outer structures of their work and their lives. She also has a BA and is a magna cum laude from Harvard University and an MPH from the University of Cape Town and an MBA from UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. I mean, how much more intelligence and experience can this girl have? But we are excited to have her today and chat with her about Power Fluency. So Meghna, thank you for coming back and having this conversation with us, continuing the conversation. There is
excited to be here.
I know. Okay, good. So for people, I know we did this in the first episode, for people who are just tuning in this time, can you one more time please explain, even briefly, Power Fluency as you speak about it?
Yeah, so I think a lot about power and its connection to leadership, and how people lead, how groups react to leadership. And so a lot of times, I think right now, the conversation about power is we've gotten to a place of power literacy. We can kind of name that there's a power under dynamic here, a power over dynamic, or a power with dynamic. But this, to me, also comes across as a little bit static, where I feel power is a very dynamic conversation between two people or two groups, that sort of thing. And so Power Fluency kind of, for me, is about not just being able to name a power dynamic, see what's going on around ourselves, but then to locate ourselves in the power dynamic. What's the role we play in propagating and continuing that dynamic, and then making some different choices. And I know we're both laughing here because it's just that of all of a sudden, when we kind of put ourselves in the dynamic, understand our role, all of a sudden we have access to a lot more choices, maybe different actions that were unexpected. And so all of a sudden there's a power fluency of, being able to work with whatever you have and being able to read the power of a situation, and to choose how you'd like to move forward in that dynamic.
Yes, thank you. And I would love to know your thoughts or what you say to someone who kind of feels like power is a dirty word, because I get that a lot, because I talk about your wealthy self and people go, oh, money is the root of all evil, or I don't want money, I don't love, it's whatever. They have this aversion to it. And then when you dig into it, you find it's really not money that they have the aversion to. So I'm curious, with power and the word power, it can be so charged, what you experienced around that.
Yeah, I mean, I have the experience myself and with many of my clients, where power is defined negatively in their system, and authority is even worse. I've had people stop breathing and we start talking about authority, which just kind of tells me, there's a very young version of this person that had a difficult experience around authority. But power, has been, for many people who have a negative view of it, power has been used inappropriately in their lives. And so they've been conditioned as keeping it away from them. They have an arm's length. They want to stay away from it. They have a lot of projections onto it. And I think it's very similar with money. You can put a lot of projection onto money. Same thing with power or people within powerful positions. So many leaders I talk to do not like to define themselves as powerful or as an authority figure. And part of our work is I have them kind of stand in appropriate power. That's what I mean by an authentic sense of power and authority. Standing in appropriate power, appropriate authority, instead of the vision they have from their younger self of an angry parent or a distant teacher or a disciplinarian kind of coach or person in their lives. That's what got coded. And then all of a sudden, when they can see, oh, I can redefine power, I can redefine my rules around power to fit me and my worldview, it becomes a much better relationship very quickly.
That's fabulous. Because I can get how if you have that view of power, that projection on it, that it's awful, it's not good, it's to be resisted, avoided, or you fear you're going to lose your sense of belonging if you're seen as too powerful, then the conflict it creates for someone who wants to do leadership, who wants to make change in the world, who's up to something, and up to something that's authentic for them, that gives them joy, and how that conflict must get played out with internally. I mean, what have you seen around that? I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very common. I think because like it's that common story of someone who has a negative experience, and like let's imagine someone who wins the lottery, like doesn't have a lot of money, all of a sudden wins lottery. There's so many studies that like within 6 months to a year, they often tend to have lost all that money or it's not safe in their system to hold on to that money. Like there are those studies out there. I think it's very similar with power of like people get hungry for it because power gets conflated. Sorry, like I'm going to slow down my thinking. So part of my work, I often ask a question around what game are you? And a lot of people, they're kind of like, I don't know. But if we're talking about the world, most of us are in a status game in the work world. And so power plays a kind of very specific component in the status game, in that it is it's evidence of your status, having power. And like status, it is conferred by, like power is conferred by others. Others say you're powerful. Like that sort of, there's that weird thing. And so with power, most people, it's not just about power, it's the use of power in the status game.
I'm sorry, use of power in what?
In the status game.
Oh, status.
Sorry about that. So it's noticing what is seen as powerful in this status game. Is it that I have access to certain information? I have a certain amount of money and resources. What confers power and therefore status? And it becomes interesting when my clients and I start to kind of come to the usual conclusion of people don't like to play the status game. They want to be at work and do their work for a bigger reason than status. And once we name that game, whatever creation game they're in, then all of a sudden power becomes very enabling of those creations that my clients want.
Oh, that's great. So tell me if I'm wrong here. So it's almost like in the status game, power is, it has the energy in my system, like I'm pulling in versus from the top, versus when it's for a vision and you've taken status out, it's like power is the thrust behind you that moves you forward.
Yeah, it becomes a tool.
Yes.
Your position of power, you start to think differently about who will you elevate, where will resources go. Whereas if you're still in the status game, there might be more of that hoarding mentality, is more power is better, because I'll just keep getting more and more status.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. So then how do you, knowing all this, how do you empower leaders who are frustrated, to help them find the actions to make the difference, to be more in that vision game versus the status game?
I'm smiling because there's a little bit of an accountability sandwich that every leader has to eat before, and you know what the real name of that sandwich is. I
SHIT.
can say it. I
Yeah.
can't say it. But you know the real name of the sandwich,
Yeah.
to get out of being a frustrated leader.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so this is that moment of, as a frustrated leader, what is the game you're in?
Mm-hmm.
What is the actual game you're in versus the game you think you're in?
So give us examples of that.
Yeah, so a lot of people will think, oh, I have a fair shot at the promotion. So like a frustrated leader, I should have gotten that promotion, or I should have gotten that extra funding or that special project. Um, it's dependent on the merits of the work I've put in. Your merits are kind of only known to you. What have you been projecting? What is the shared narrative about what you've shared? So that's the difference between the game you think you're in versus the game you're actually in. You may think like, oh, I've been staying late, I've missed kind of family functions and other responsibilities, but that's not what people will respond to. Oh, I finished this, I got this to completion, that sort of thing. So it's realizing what's the actual game I'm in. So I had a client who very much wanted to be seen as a thoughtful decision maker, kind of someone who drives the business forward, but she was caught up in a likability game. Every conversation started with, this person said this about me and that person said this about me. And I'm like, are you in the decision making game or are you in the likability game? Getting people to like you. And she realized, like, I grew up such a lonely kid, such a lonely immigrant kid. I felt so awkward. It means so much to me. Even though this woman was in her late 50s, it meant so much for her to belong and be seen as like one of the folks that you could pal around with. And kind of moving her from the likability game into the effective decision maker game.
Yeah. Did that make a big difference?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All of a sudden, like, she could just be in her power and authority
Yeah.
of, not every decision will be understood. Not every decision is a unanimous decision. So how could she kind of, given her phenomenal education, her phenomenal experience, lead differently?
Oh, that's great. And then I run into this a lot with my clients, but how do you see that working with someone who's got imposter syndrome, especially as a first and only? Like, who am I to be here, to be this successful when those who came before me, you know, sacrificed so much?
Yeah. I hate the term imposter syndrome.
Okay.
So I think you and I have talked about this oftentimes, of using the metaphor of imposter syndrome. To me is like, we've come to a stop sign at a four-way intersection. And what someone with imposter syndrome does is they come to the stop sign, they turn off the car, they get out, they lock the door, and they walk home. When actually it is just a signal of, hey, we're at an intersection. There may be unexpected people or things happening. So look in all directions and proceed with caution. Imposter syndrome is just part of your like internal system saying, hey, we're in unfamiliar territory, we're in uncharted territory, and we need to move differently. So first of all, I like to clean up like I don't like to use imposter syndrome in my work, just because if I'm working with you as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
you have clinically bad self-esteem if you're still talking to me about imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you can feel like I've never done this before. The air is too thin for me to breathe. I have gone off my map.
Yes.
Those are all very fair.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, okay. And I had a client like this. He, in his first executive role, I had worked with him when he was a senior director, and then he got promoted into a VP role, so an executive role. Um, and he was just like, oh my god, I don't know how things work up here. And so we need to reset kind of what is the map. And we realize that actually the work here is a lot more about managing other people's agendas and like pushing forward in terms of, getting yeses and consensus for his project. So he just had to like tap into a very different skill set than what he had been rewarded for when he was a manager.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, because he got nerdy positive feedback that made him, feel confident. And you're right, you have to move differently in a different.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we started with that original question of how do you get frustrated leaders to kind of take actions differently, and especially if you're a first and only, to get out beyond the like. So it's just noticing that anytime anyone does something for the first time, it's difficult. Probably the first 10 times it's difficult. And so it's like letting go of the okay, this is going to be difficult for anyone in my role. And then it's connecting into what's my role. Like I said, this is the accountability sandwich of like what are the actions that I need to take? What is the kind of disconnect in critical thinking that I need to correct?
And it's interesting. I love that. I love that whole thing, how you break it down, because it actually takes the overwhelm down. And usually what I find, I don't know if this is true for you, but what's fueling that, again, as we talked about in the first episode, is that childhood experience that's projecting on this new role or this new task, this new project, or this new partnership that gets all wonky, distorted, and haywired.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you do this exercise with your clients or if you've talked about this exercise before, but kind of like letting people connect to that part of them and then asking that part how old it thinks you are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We do that. Yeah. Absolutely. And then you're kind of shocked, like, oh, wait, what? So, of course, if it's a 3-year-old, a three-year-old's going to feel out of place. And I love that you don't use the word imposter syndrome, but feel like this isn't for me in an adult's role in leading a team or managing someone's PR and marketing of a business or whatever it is. But your adult self is capable of it, as you said, looking at that sandwich and what is it, which bite, needs to be eaten first.
Yeah, because when we take on the accountability of I am in my mid 40s, I am in my mid 50s, that also is the accountability of certain paths are no longer open to me. Certain actions are no longer open to me, and that's sad to me.
Yeah.
That used to mean a lot to me.
Yeah. And how do you reconcile that?
I think it's just that of like being true to the feeling of that is sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not resisting it.
Yeah, feeling the feeling all the way.
Yeah. And allowing it to be part of your experience at this stage. I don't get to have that experience anymore. Yeah. Yeah. And then realizing that there's also other experiences you get to have now.
Yeah, and could that original thing you wanted just have been a proxy for something else?
Yeah.
And so it does ask for a lot of self knowledge, self presence, self responsibility, and accountability. And I think this isn't really depicted well in our
Really?
media. It isn't depicted well in our media. We rarely hear these stories of people being responsible, of taking change, unless, oh, I was this addict and I was at the bottom and then I had this like apotheosis and I'm healed. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. Like, like, like so much of the magic that we have is in those mundane things of, wow, usually I would want to eat a bag of chips right now, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to call my friend. I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm just going to go drink a glass of water. One
Thank
of
you.
my former coaches and mentors used to say, those small hinges swing big doors.
Yes, I love that. Small hinges swing big doors. Oh, that's so wonderful. So let me ask you this briefly because we are getting to the end of this episode, but what are you most intrigued with in your work that you don't get to talk about as much as you'd like?
Mm, yeah. Yeah, there's so much fertile territory. I think this whole constellating of our family systems into our work worlds and how we play with it is one thing. But more and more, I've been thinking about this idea of moral imagination. This is a term I first heard from the founder of the Acumen Fund, Jacqueline Novogratz. And I don't know if this is how she would define it, but to me, like, I was just like, how do those two words go together?
Yeah.
It's weird. And what I notice is a lot of our conversation about leadership and power does not have moral imagination. That idea of imagining something with kind of a moral compass at its center. Like imagining a world where that I think many of us would want to live in. I think a lot of people are driven a lot more by expediency or getting kind of a short-term goal. And I think if groups of leaders could open up around what is something morally imaginative for me right now. Like I think something like universal basic income. It's a morally imaginative idea.
Yeah.
It starts to also, I think, start to cast wealth separately. But I think we don't spend enough time in these kind of not seeking answers, but would it be helpful and would it nourish us to kind of open up to what if we took some of the laws of our current physics out?
Right. Oh, I love it. We talk my language now. Oh, thank you, Meghna. So, as we end, the last question I have for you is tell our audience how you create your wealthy self life in a way that is authentically aligned with the truth of who you are. How do you do that for you?
Well, Regina, you know that this is a ever evolving question, but I think right now I am really present to um, feeling my feelings all the way through. Feeling like using my feelings as not the compass, but just the response of like, hey, this interaction left me feeling this way and sitting with that. And, like, oh, I had a moment of happiness in like just sitting in my house. What was that about? What was going on there? And I think by like being really present to these very small things, it's made me aware of kind of how wealthy my life actually is.
Mm, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes. And anyone who would like to reach out and speak with Meghna Majmudar, did I say it correct? Yay! Of course, at the end of the show. For her executive coaching and strategy partnership, she is at powerfluency.co. We are so happy to have her. If anyone, if you enjoyed what you heard, if you enjoyed what you liked, please share it. There's enough fear and upset in the world. We want to create more joy and more self-sovereignty. And if you have any questions you'd like to share, please send it to your wealthy self at E360 TV Live. So happy you joined us today, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Meghna.